I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996, I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've opened Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
on.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the red
Number 322.
I sad duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Already Dead. It looks like we're missing our boy Jose tonight. Yep, and it looks like we're joined by Jules again as the co-host, which is always fine by me. I think really it'll be a lot, I don't know, kind of, it's pretty natural for us to just go schizo, right? So I think that we'll have a good time as far as that is concerned, especially in, like, I don't know, man. Like, I've been losing my mind over the past week, kind of diving down into the rabbit hole of the Hosanna church scandal, which
you had mentioned that to me.
Yeah, well, if you remember,
curious about it, bro.
If you remember, William Ramsey is the one that brought it up, right? When he came on and we interviewed him like a few weeks back, and I was unaware of that being really the true detective, right? The story that inspired the actual first season of the True Detective. And so that was kind of news to me when William introduced it to me. I had always known that there was some sort of truthful case that inspired it, but I was not aware of what exactly the case was. And once, just like, honestly, man, just scratching the surface, just the surface level details available, the parallels between Hosanna, Kincora, McMartin, Franklin, the Presidio, the Finders. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, brother.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like this recycled, resurfacing, kind of networks of abuse that share these similar, just extraordinary similarities, right? That
Probably Namrock.
it has to be, honestly, because I talked to him just the other night about it before we did. Either it was on one of the morning streams or it was when I did Watergate Part 7 with him. And yeah, I had brought it up privately.
That stream, didn't you?
Do what?
I forgot you had went on a morning stream. I had missed it, dude.
Yeah, we did one the morning that Sam was joining us that night, just to kind of promote it. And then I think I went on, like, I don't know, Friday or something. I don't even remember at this point. But I will say that beyond, like, all the appointments and, all the hysteria surrounding, like, the transition process between administrations and, like, clearly this escalation in reference to, like, let's say Ukraine, for example, right? It very much is in line with what I had mentioned not long ago about, I had asked Jose if maybe they would really kind of the establishment would really exploit this ultimate lame duck session that we're experiencing with Biden, right? And kind of just exploit every single aspect of the military as far as the military industrial complex is concerned, taking advantage of this time, right? And especially of the transition in itself, because I think it's amazing though that we need to like take a moment and appreciate the fact that the emperor truly has no clothes on at this very moment. And like we
Absolutely.
have a prime example of pointing to the White House and everyone collectively understanding without saying it out loud that Biden is clearly not pulling the strings and directly in charge of right this fucking global establishment,
No,
right?
and it's like how long has he been dead? Right? Already dead. You feel
Hey
me?
man, at this point, I would not at all be shocked if that were actually
Guys,
true.
I am not Jose. Obviously, I'm Jules. Great Pill Podcast. I understand if you stop watching right now,
That's it.
but I will try my best to fill his shoes. Yeah,
Dude, what have you been up to anyway? I
I was
saw you
here
were streaming.
anyway. So, dude, just
Exactly.
not much, man. Just working and
Mhm.
doing these little live streams that I do like once, maybe twice a week.
Right.
Yeah, they're fun. They're fun. My audience is the best.
Oh yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
Dude, I think really I had such a good time when we had Tripoli on last week. Like that was
Yeah, dude,
amazing,
Sam's
brother.
the man.
Yeah.
He's
He's
a
a good
super
dude,
sweet
right?
guy, man. Like he really is a kind soul. You can tell. He has good energy.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you guys, just so you know, typically we do the call-ins, but Jules and I haven't set it up yet. So it's usually done specifically through Jose when he's on, but we'll have to get the Google Voice access at some point and try and get it figured out. But we need a better structure in itself so we can all kind of be able to engage when the call-ins happen. But as far as like midway through the conversation around, the 45-minute mark, we will allow patrons to pop up alongside us if you guys have anything to add to the conversation. Also, by the way, I had mentioned Hosanna, right? Hosanna, the Hosanna. I'm not quite sure how to
Hosanna.
pronounce it because it's apparently a term that translates from Hebrew to "please save us." Yeah,
That doesn't surprise me.
it shouldn't, man.
No.
I read about this in the Seattle Times, right? Because basically this was originally published in 2005 in like June, but
Yeah.
it really is kind of it's a decent introduction to the whole thing because it was I think it was titled Cult-like Rituals, Sex Abuse Alleged at Church. And brother, when I say that there's satanic ritual abuse involved, but right, not only that, I mean, it's honestly,
Hey, right before we get started, I'm gonna run
yeah,
to the restroom because I got home and then he asked me if I would fill in.
you're
And
good,
so I
buddy.
kind of, I was gonna, when y'all first start, I can get up and go pee or get up and grab a drink usually or whatever. So
Go ahead, my
before we
friend.
get started, because I don't want to sit here and have to pee for like
Dude, no worries. I'll just introduce everybody to this.
okay.
You go ahead, buddy. Yeah.
I'll be right back.
So yeah, I found this interesting as well before we get into Hosanna church scandal because it's yeah, let's say it's a striking resemblance to that first season of True Detective, although they do pull punches in that season, I will say. But at the very least, the fact that the larger, network at play was at least implicated, that in itself is kind of valuable. But I don't know. It's a very strange story, and it's something that will definitely be long lasting. I will not be forgetting this one. But before we get into it, I thought it's interesting because there is this domestic legislation that's attempting to be passed at this moment. And it basically says that Congress is set to vote on the most dangerous domestic anti-terrorism bill since the Patriot Act. And that caught my attention, especially since it was on Mondo Weiss, and it was also this article was spotlighted on antiwar.com as well. But it's very interesting, and it basically says that if passed, the Anti-Charities bill would be the most dangerous piece of domestic anti-terrorism legislation since the Patriot Act, and it would take direct aim at the Palestine movement. And so essentially, the government is effectively proposing this amendment to the tax code, which empowers the state to effectively defund nonprofits by labeling them terrorist supporting organizations, quietly slithered through the House of Representatives unchecked until arriving on the floor this Tuesday. And it was passed on the I'm not sure the current state of the bill, but I know it was definitely passed through the House. But anyway, the proponents of the Anti-Charities bill exploited the aftermath of Trump's reelection to fast track this legislation using a procedure that required a two-thirds majority. So it basically, this is a backdoor to create this sort of, domestic terrorism list, as well as, effectively defunding any sort of anti-war nonprofit organization that's attempting to provide, let's say, aid or any sort of support to Gaza and the Palestinians.
Yeah.
And so it's something that's worth mentioning at the very least. And so, it clearly is a civil liberties disaster. And I think that nonprofits, we should be very skeptical because they have been clearly utilized by they've sort of been utilized to, facilitate mechanisms of organized crime, providing plausible deniability, things of that nature, right, through these nonprofits. And we also can point to like the White Helmets and NGOs like that. I'm much more skeptical of them because you have this hidden hand of intelligence that's always involved. And for example, with Seymour Hersh, you can always point to the fact that, right, the false flag attempting to get us to invade and provoke an invasion into Syria and label Bashar al-Assad as of course, like, using chemical weapons against his own people, right? That was the whole notion. But of course, it ends up that the videos were staged propaganda by non-government organizations, right? NGOs in the area that were allied with the Al-Qaeda groups and the ISIS groups in that safe haven, right? Which the United States Department was effectively utilizing to
As they
destabilize.
always do, man. And
Exactly.
they fund them in the first place, right? They create
100%,
these
buddy.
monsters, and then they create these psyops, these false flags that
100%.
you talk about. You know much more about the subject as a whole than me.
Well, I've just been obsessed with
It's
foreign
incredible
policy for
how much
quite
you know,
some
man.
time. Dude, thank you, my friend. But it's really just, minuscule in comparison to someone like Scott Horton, who just came out with that new book, Provoked, right? And yeah, everyone, I encourage to go grab a copy of that. I have all his previous work as well. And antiwar.com, it really provides just such a valuable right perspective into these international conflicts. And I think that if you just spend your morning going over right the new published headlines on antiwar.com and kind of reading through let's say Dave DeCamp's newest piece or whoever is being featured, you will have much more of a fundamental working knowledge of these conflicts and how we've been deceived and provoked into supporting them at any level. That it's kind of just like it's so eye-opening that I have just a very deep appreciation for what Scott and all those guys at the Libertarian Institute have been doing for all these years,
Man.
Yeah. And for that matter, before we get into the Colts, the ICC issues arrest warrants for Netanyahu and former defense minister Gallant, right? And yeah, I
that
just
this
think, and
week?
it's all, of course, for their role in the genocide in Gaza, right? And so
Yeah,
it's kind of like,
that's
what
wild, man.
consequences will they truly, actually have to. I don't know, man. Like, I just can't see many of these individuals being held accountable. Um, really, what this means is that any nation that's signed on to the International Criminal Court and the ICC parameters, like, they would then have the right to allegedly detain Netanyahu under these charges if he were to visit their country, let's say, with yeah, which I can't imagine that would actually take place. I mean, if anything, I
He's
could
pretty
see
smart.
him.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, if anything, I could see him potentially, like, being charged in Israel itself and with something like that, because there has been, like, you know, just there's been a lot of dissent internally within Israel as well, right? Which I find interesting, just based on Netanyahu himself, which he doesn't really have much public support in
especially in the
general.
past year, dude. Like
Yeah.
slow build up. I was talking about this the other night, and yeah, this past year really uh, kind of opened. It
Well,
kind
yeah.
of did them in, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard, especially, um, comparing the Palestinians to animals and outright calling for, starvation policies, right? And, like, just
Trying to rape fucking men, and well, we're on YouTube. I'm sorry. I'm gonna get you a strike, dude.
dude, I
Remember
accidentally,
that.
yeah, I guess I shouldn't
Remind me,
repeat
'cause
it.
I don't stream to YouTube too much.
Right. Man, all I know is that I very much am not accustomed to censorship, and I don't plan on becoming that way. I don't know, it's just
Really, but you have
philosophically.
to take precautions because, you don't wanna
I
lose your channel or anything. I
I
understand.
understand that, but I will say that, I'm ignorant to the algorithm. I understand that, clearly it's key buzzwords, right, that trigger, the algorithmic censorship. I would imagine that's the case. It's been explained that way to me before. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense, but still, like, you shouldn't be shadow banned because you say the word fentanyl. Right? Like, that's
That
absolutely
happened?
ridiculous,
Oh,
you know?
fuck, man.
Yeah, and when you watch something like, I haven't watched it in forever. I think it was a Gibney documentary back in the day,
Yeah.
but it was called Cartel Land, and it explained how, yeah, fentanyl, methamphetamine, all these different, you know, um, more harder substances are being, like, legitimately trafficked through federal through the intelligence apparatus, utilizing cartels and the Mexican government. I mean, it's like a policy that's institutionalized, that they are right, manufacturing methamphetamine, fentanyl, and then they have the Chinese fentanyl being processed and brought through the Mexican border as well. So it's like, that's a fact of life, and all, the history of the war on drugs and just the basic history of it. I mean, that's exactly what they've been doing from day one. So it's a policy of, domestic laws
They just
enforcing
capitalized on the drug trade. That's all they did.
100%, man.
That's
Yeah.
all the
Why do you
government did.
think the first thing we did in Afghanistan is guard the poppy fields, and then production of the poppy and heroin exports just, I mean, it was absolutely outrageous, right? Pharmaceutical companies just, raking in profits,
Yeah.
and that is Smedley Butler's war is a racket, right? I mean, that's a age-old tactic, but yeah, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, that explained how they used NGOs to just kind of, right, infiltrate foreign states and yeah, get them on the dole, basically, just and hold it. It's very much a process of human compromise, just like sexual blackmail in many ways, right? This is
Yeah.
kind of just, par for the course, in my opinion. And I don't think that you I don't think that it's possible to achieve a position of power without being compromised to some level, and especially if you're talking the establishment, right? Having any sort of control or accountability that you can. I don't imagine, right? That, and again, we can point to, examples of this happening, right? Where let's say just Confessions of a DC Madam itself, right? If you look at the Craig Spence operation that was going on with Henry Vincent's call girls and all of this, and or gay escort service, I mean. And
One of
and
those.
yeah, it's ridiculous because you have Secret Service detail providing 24-hour protection and security for Craig Spence and his property rigged with audiovisual blackmail, right?
Yeah.
And then you have key prominent administration officials within the George Bush Senior, right, administration being directly implicated as being involved. And also, you have the access of the call boys, the young boys being brought for a midnight tour of the White House.
During the Bush administration?
During the Bush and Reagan administration.
Oh,
It's
fuck.
fascinating, man. And Larry King's involved with all of that, and that is legitimately Franklin, right? The Franklin
Yeah.
scandal.
Yeah. That's one of the more disturbing stories.
Right.
Yeah.
And for example, dude, like I never told Jose this when I did the Finder series with him, because I think it was just like we had covered we had covered a lot, and really we had made the overall comprehensive alternative narrative, I think, as much as I possibly could, but we really just ran out of time. And at the end of the day, it's like you can only bring so much to the table, which clearly
You were telling me, you were like, yeah, we're doing our part 5 on Watergate. I'm like, God, dude, like I did 4 parts on Inky alone with my co-host Adrian, and
Yep.
that was over a span of a month, dude. I don't know if that's how long it took y'all to do Watergate, or if it took you longer.
Man, we're on part 7 right now,
Oh
and
my
I will
God.
just say
Wow.
that I'm still finding more things, man. Like it really is. Watergate's amazing. It's one of the most insane scandals, and it's these threads that just continue to unravel, and you have no idea the level of depth, and it provides the perfect window for how they would run such a clandestine domestic operation, right? Especially when the intention behind it is to kind of exploit the connection from the organized crime to the sexual blackmail to the intelligence community, and exploit that connection, right? By legitimately, you know, compromising individuals within administrations to then get all the way to the president himself, which Nixon, of course, was forced to resign after it was all said and done. But
Yeah.
you have so many different examples of loose ends that were forced to basically. You see when the intelligence agencies kind of take care of their own after one of these scandals because they're playing the game, right? They're falling in line. They're not rocking the boat. But the moment that the individual decides that, well, maybe they'll write a tell-all, right? And they'll explain, they'll explain the role that they played in the truth behind the scandal, and they'll benefit solely and individually financially from that. Well, then you kind of you kind of like you see this recycled tactic of them being hung out to dry, right? And usually discredited beforehand. It's very interesting, but I will say that
sure it
when
is.
you talk about people like Louis J. Russell, right, which really he's like proof positive that the Columbia Plaza operation had been in full swing, which is the one tied to the DNC during Watergate. Um, it's crazy because he was like this former baseball player, and he had been like discovered by Phil McInbailey, this attorney who was like bribing the Vice Squad cops in DC, so they would tell him where they were operating around town, so he would then give that intelligence to Heidi Reichen, who was the madam of the Columbia Plaza operation, which she told Phil Bailey, who was an attorney in DC. She told him that she was being protected by the CIA, right? And we know that she was running the this Columbia Plaza call girl referral operation. It was basically this hooker referral pipeline set up at the DNC through an intermediary, right?
She was fucking, what's her name? Maxwell.
Oh, it was yeah, basically. I
That's
mean,
like her
because
for
that's
the
what you
DNC, basically.
yeah. And you like it's
Ghislaine? Yeah,
yeah,
Ghislaine or
Ghislaine.
Ghislaine. Dude, I can't say her fucking name right. I tried. I
Right.
just sound like super Southern when I do it, so I don't really do it.
I'm pretty sure it's Ghislaine,
My
but I've
wife.
heard it pronounced a lot of different ways, you know. So who knows? But it's pretty nuts what happened to this Lewis Russell guy because there was this tactic that they used called Aspen roulette. All right. And the CIA used this tactic. And
As a
Howard
torture
Hunt
method?
do what?
As a torture method?
No, it was as an assassination method. So
Oh,
a technique
okay.
to let's
It
say
sounds like a pretty gnarly fucking torture method. Or
yeah.
whatever, like some, I don't know what you said. Something
It
to do to
was
somebody to make
aspirin
them talk.
roulette because basically
Aspen
what they would
roulette.
do is they would replace in your bottle of aspirin, they would replace one of the aspirin. Yeah, yeah.
Roulette. I
Yeah.
thought, dude, I don't know what I thought you said. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, dude.
Aspirin.
But it's crazy because they were clearly what had happened was Howard Hunt, this CIA, covert operative who had allegedly retired from the agency. Of course, this was his third
Retired.
retirement. Yeah. His third fucking retirement. And he goes to work for Mullen and Company, which is this it's this basically it's a PR firm that in DC that's owned by Robert Mullen, which that's an entirely different story because this guy Robert Mullen is deeply involved with the Mormon Church, and I found that interesting because Robert Mullen he actually it's so funny because he basically tells Douglas Caddy, right? That this guy this attorney who's working at Mullen and Company, he claims that he received this puzzling phone call from Robert Mullen while he was working at Mullen and Company, who was, of course, the boss and owner of this PR firm, which held the lucrative CIA contract, which was a CIA cover contract intended to provide plausible deniability. But so he's given a call, right, by this Robert Mullen, and he happened to be in Chile at the time when he calls him. And Doug asks him, "Well, what are you doing in Chile?" And he responds by saying, "We're here to overthrow Allende." So it was legitimately you have Robert Mullen, right, in Chile during the overthrow of Allende and the regime there, which was, clearly a part of Operation Condor and everything that was happening with the CIA overthrowing regimes. And so it's just absolutely ridiculous that was the individual who is running Mullen and Company. It's a great example of how they operate, right? But anyway, before I forget my point, it's interesting because Jack Anderson was this columnist at the time during all of this, and he was really giving problems to the Nixon administration and the CIA as well. And basically, he had been writing these exposing articles on the Pakistan-India conflict at the time. And so if you know how the policy toward the press at this time is really something to behold, right? It proves that Mockingbird was in full control of the mainstream media assets, really in almost every single publication you can point to, let alone right TV and I mean it's
absolutely everything.
Right. It's crazy, man, and it goes all the way back to the late 40s, at the very least 1951. And so
Yeah.
it's not as if this is anything new, and it never ceased to exist either. So the Warren Commission itself, once all these hearings with the church committee hearings and everything, and all of this was allegedly, you know, um, uh, exposed to the public, right? And it like I've said before, and we've discussed plenty. It was largely driven underground, right? And so, how do you achieve um, driving clandestine covert operations underground domestically? You create CIA cutouts, right? And that's what Operation Chaos exposed, that the CIA had really developed and manufactured and just created out of whole cloth a lot of different proprietary firms and companies that they could utilize and exploit to their advantage around the world. And so this is a technique that they continue to use to this day. So Jack Anderson, thorn in the side of the establishment at the time, this journalist, he was the one that they were intending on using. They were hypothetically theorizing, how could we assassinate this Jack Anderson, this columnist that's pissing us off right now? And so E. Howard Hunt, who CIA operative, member of the highly secretive Office of Security, the OS, which only answered to Richard Helms himself, the director of the CIA. They had, again, both he and McCord, E. Howard Hunt and James McCord, were members of the Office of Security and only reported to Helms, and were also allegedly retired from the agency while they were conducting the Watergate operation. So it's just kind of ridiculous. But Hunt takes G. Gordon Liddy, who's this dupe basically being set up by these, CIA operatives who are kind of operating under this secret agenda.
Yeah.
And so the E. Howard Hunt takes G. Gordon Liddy to meet with this CIA poisons expert and talk about various methods of how they could perform an assassination on a journalist in America. And
Dude, this was all over a columnist or whatever you're. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
it's amazing, but it's a brief window into
Yeah. No,
how
that's,
they operate and
that's
what they're willing to do, right?
it's fucking wild. Just for an experiment too, just to test out this little op that we got going.
Well,
That's
I
wild,
mean,
dude.
I'm not at all surprised that this is one of the methods that they utilize, though, because
Surprised.
yeah, among the aspirin roulette,
The
which was
shittier it gets, the least I'm surprised. I'm like, nope, not surprised anymore. Fuck this. Like,
right,
it's terrible, dude. It's terrible.
dude. It's crazier than that, because Robert Merritt was like this police informant to this military intelligence asset in the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. And he was basically approached by intelligence assets and CIA operatives, or assets of military intelligence, as an informant to attempt an assassination on Douglas Caddy, that attorney I just mentioned, who worked at the Robert Mullen and Company, through basically through gay sex. So they were gonna, during the course of gay sex, he was going to use a poison pill to insert into his rectum.
Oh, dude.
And so they were
wait.
attempting to poison a man through his anal cavity. And I found that to be very interesting, because a lot of the people involved in this were closeted homosexuals. And it was strange. There was an entire division that was devoted and dedicated to sexual blackmail, that was just within the DC Metropolitan Police Department. So it's astounding, honestly, man. But I could talk about Watergate forever. So we should stop talking about Watergate.
Yeah, man. No, we you said you had some stuff that you were gonna send me.
For sure, dude. I have
But I don't know. We really didn't have anything planned tonight, but it's okay.
I know, not at all. I'll be honest, I'm just rolling with things that interest me and the things that I pulled up just as far as like throughout the course of my research, like throughout the week. And also a few things I'd been sitting on that I was hoping to bring to the show at some point. But yeah, I'll get into
I
Hosanna
heard
because
he's asking about Hosea.
Hosanna
Hosanna.
church scandal is what it was. But yeah, I'll get into that for sure. I do think that
What's up,
at
Zero?
some point
What's up,
it's in,
everybody? Sorry, I haven't talked to the chat yet. What's
that's
up,
so great.
everybody?
I know, yeah. As often as you
What's up?
can, man, you find things. I'm the worst at engaging
Well,
with the
yeah,
chat
dude.
because
I'm pretty good at engaging with everybody.
too often, my friend, I am just a prisoner of the moment, and wherever my brain is taking me throughout the course of my schizophrenic rant, will likely end up, But I don't know, man. Like I was really intending on bringing up that whole manufacturing mass shooters at the New Mexico compound with Tripoli when he came on last week, and of course we never even got into that. But that would be a perfect place to dovetail, as far as it would dovetail perfectly with the death education program at the Columbine High School, which reminded me of MK Ultra techniques that were used on Ted Kaczynski while he was at Harvard. And because it was all about writing false confessions, right? And so much more than that, because the death education program that was being implemented at public school levels all over the country, were basically, you know, it was really amazing because they would have you write your own eulogy, right? Write your own suicide letter for high school students. They would take you to a morgue and let you witness dead bodies.
That's like a ritual.
100%.
So
And
you had to
well,
go
this,
write
of
your
course,
suicide letter in a morgue
brother, guess what? Where this was implemented?
around dead bodies. Probably, yeah.
Death education at Columbine High School. That's where one of the schools this program was implemented.
Education.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really amazing because a lot of the classmates and the the students that went through this program, they became fascinated with death, right? And they had very strange like run-ins with, let's say, just, the the best case scenario was depression, right? Like it's disturbing as hell. And of course it was implemented at, right, the state school level, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so the indoctrination schools and so I don't know, but an example was like this classmate of the Columbine students, um, Tara Becker. She was a student from Columbine High and went to a pro family conference in Colorado, and basically to tell the attendees about death education at the school and the effect it had on her. And so the report says that Tara brought with her a booklet she had helped to compile for one of her school classes. This booklet was called Masquerade and was full of subliminal pictures and prose. Tara explained how she had been taught to use the hidden double meaning, subliminals, and how she had focused so much of her time and attention on death that she herself had tried to commit suicide. This is a student from Columbine.
Yeah.
Went through the same exact program as Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris,
Yeah.
right? And it's
MK Ultra, dude. Yeah, you're right.
that's what it seems like, right?
That's an
It
MK Ultra
truly is
course.
what it seems like. But it's just
man.
absurd, man, because
It's wild.
a videotape was like basically a video was made of her testimony, and it was distributed by this forum, and the tape aired on the BBC. I think it was definitely on British Broadcasting, and then there were feature stories on it as well. And so the producers at 2020 saw the video and decided to do a segment on death education, which was aired in 1990 at Columbine High School.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
You can't make that shit up, bro.
You can't make it up. So Tara explained that the subject of death was integrated into many of the courses at her high school. She said that death was made to look glamorous, that living was hard and difficult, and that reincarnation would solve their problems. Students were told that they would always return to a much better life form. They would return to the oversoul and become like God.
Dude,
How is this?
what kind of theology is that? I mean, like, I don't know. Like, that's definitely some kind of rebirth, death and rebirth ritual, you know?
Dude,
Sounds and that relates to a lot of mystery schools. So I don't
100%,
know.
buddy.
Uh, you'd have to look at the symbolism or whatever. I guess what kind of rituals they could be. You could look it up. Be careful looking into that shit though.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, apparently this has had quite the effect as well. I mean, there have been many different suicides of students who attended the courses, and yeah, there were, you know, I mean, plenty
It
of
may be. Maybe
do what?
Masonic. But
Hey,
the
man.
Freemasons are
People
just
like to dismiss
one
the idea that because, somebody from the local chapter of the Freemason lodge that hangs out like it's, you know, like it's just some sort of right, you're kicking it with your buddies and what do they call it when you're man, veterans of foreign wars and stuff, right? What are those you know what I mean? It's basically a bar for
well,
just
yeah.
individual. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like a VF like a fucking VFW or something.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
have little Freemason lodges in like the backwoods in Mississippi. It's
And it's
wild, but
true. I mean, it is like I don't know how much they practice the higher level of knowledge that is, I would think, has been, there are gatekeepers within these fraternal organizations. And I think that you don't consider the alpha lodges and their impact, right? And so it's like Kinkora is the perfect example of that, right? The alpha lodges and how they were primary in the facilitation of Operation Clockwork Orange, and how essentially it was, these powerful individuals within these overlapping fraternal organizations, including the Alpha Freemasonic lodges in the UK,
well,
were
yeah,
directly involved in
okay.
disrupting all of Irish society at the time and creating a civil war, and pretty amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the Freemasons are just one of many mystery schools, you know, many secret societies. So could be Masonic, it could be, you know, uh Osirian mystery schools, could be like some female cult, you know, Temple of Venus or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
You have to look into it, man. Look at the symbolism though. You can always tell by the symbolism.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 100% true, and I think that you know you consider that, right, and the death education that I just mentioned, and then of course all the intelligence connections of Wayne Harris, the father of Eric Harris, and the idea that I even heard, I think it was, who was it, Chris Graves, when he went on with Charlie Robinson on macroaggressions,
Yeah.
and Charlie's the best, man. But he went on, and it was pretty fairly recently. He did a Columbine episode, very worth your time. It's not even that long, and they kind of just really plot out the bare bones of kind of like the most, I would say, just extraordinary. I think it's mainly when you can point to things like the helicopters overhead and right, the NATO van with the shield on it, and you have like um, you know major generals on the ground at the time during the Columbine massacre. And yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous, but it's so much more than that, because they go into how Chris Graves was talking to, on that episode, about how the town itself, Littleton, could potentially be this sort of what they call a safe community, or a CIA safe house. Well, this is a safe community in Littleton, which is the reason why you have the military, um, um, the military base so close by, right? The military intelligence operation is being ran out of that base as well, and uh, and yeah, there was a FEMA comms van and some U.S. Major General on the ground, which that of course is significant, especially in context of like, right, like Parkland, and um, man, it just, all of these that we can point to, right? You don't even want to say schmandy schmuck, I
Yeah, you
guess,
can't say that.
right?
Say that.
But
Someone has a question for you.
what's up?
Austin, does any of the Pulse nightclub Mateen hoax narrative check out from your research, namely the claims Jim Fetz, I can't fucking read, guys. Fetzner, Fetzer made. Fuck me, man.
Right, man.
Had a long day, and yeah.
I'm trying to remember exactly what the primary claims Fetzer made, mainly because I have so many names running through my brain at this very moment that it's hard to isolate each individual name from these cases and recall exactly what role that they were playing at the time. But if I pull it back up, I'm sure I could find it here in a moment. But I will say that I really have. I've honestly become more and more, I would say, convinced that a lot of that Omar Mateen episode that I published recently was just entirely in the vein of truth. Because, I mean, it's just hearing the connections between what really did it for me was that tangible connection that Tripoli offered on Rogan, which was that New Mexico compound, and the fact that it shared the exact same path to this radical Islamic, seminary course, and this imam, right, who was directly tied into the CIA's false flag of the '93 World Trade Center bombing, and how all of the individuals who have been involved in, let's say, Omar Mateen, Michael Steven Sanford, Micah Xavier Howard, who was the Dallas shooter of the Black Lives Matter event, shot a bunch of cops. You know, and I mean, there's just so many different individuals who you can point out that were connected to this violent radical imam, okay, and had been radicalized through this online Islamic seminary course. And so again, we have another example of a tangible connection to that exact same false flag, except it comes in the form of that New Mexico training compound, which were training children for school shootings, and that's according to the prosecutors. And so, allegedly, you have 5 suspects, of course, accused of abusing 11 children at a New Mexico compound. Were training them to commit school shootings, and like I said, according to prosecutors, if the defendants were to be released from custody, there's a substantial likelihood defendants may commit new crimes due to his planning and preparation for future school shootings, according to the court documents. And this is published in August of 2018. And well, that's when it was updated. So I'm not sure when it was originally published, honestly. But I will say that when I pulled up the official public records of this case, I saw the federal jury convicted the 4 New Mexico compound defendants in connection with the kidnapping and terrorism plot. But that's where you get all the extraordinary details of what exactly, at least you kind of get introduced to a few primary actors that you could kind of probe to see what connections they potentially have. And I think that offers a much more revealing assessment of what was taking place exactly. And also that this was clearly covered up, right? And I think that that's important in itself. But
it's always covered up.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. The institutional aspect of the cover up is just as fascinating as, right, the achievement of really just controlling, right? We talked about full spectrum dominance in like the past 2 episodes basically, but when you control the perception of reality, my God, what are you capable of?
Yeah.
And that's what I am consistently finding myself doing, is just questioning what they are capable of, and honestly, reality itself in many ways, And so yeah, this makeshift compound, according to the filings, appeared to have a shooting range on the property, and loaded firearms were found on the property. And a foster parent of one of the children also said the defendant had trained the child in the use of an assault rifle in preparation for future school shootings. That's crazy, right?
Train
And
them for if they choose to assault a school or when they, or they're
not
saying to,
according.
is it to keep a school shooter out? Some other kid's going to have an assault rifle? I don't know.
It doesn't seem to be the context of this, right?
I don't know.
And so, there were all these allegations against the suspects that came in the wake of the discovery that 11 of these children were starving and had been living filthy in this compound in Amelia, New Mexico. Had no electricity or plumbing, and so authorities raided the compound on Friday as part of their search for Abdul Ghani Wahaj, a child with severe medical problems who was allegedly abducted from Georgia by his father, Siraj Wahaj, about 9 months prior. So this is in 2018, I believe. Let me make sure. Yes, it was December 2017. So yes, these reports were coming forward in 2018. And so basically, after the authorities raided the compound, the boys' remains were found, and police said it was not yet clear whether the remains were of the 4-year-old child, but it was proven that it was allegedly this 4-year-old Abdul Ghani Wahaj. And so the 5 defendants, Wahaj, his sisters, and then also I believe the spouses let's see, his sisters, Hura Wahaj, I don't know how to pronounce it, and Subhana Wahaj, who are thought to be the children's mothers. Lucas Morton and Janie LaVille were each arraigned in New Mexico courtroom on 11 counts of child abuse related to the neglect and abuse of the children. The 5 who pled not guilty were given pretrial detention, set for Monday, and of course, there were 4 later convicted. But family members of the suspects said they didn't know anything of the alleged training for school shooters. But Wahaj's father, Imam Siraj Wahaj, a controversial New York imam, said he has no knowledge of the alleged training, and spokesman Imam Al-Hajj Talib Abdur Rashid. So
I think you're doing good. I don't think you butchered him too hard.
I appreciate it. Fire Pixie, I swear I will go to Hosanna right after this. I promise you. I promise you.
I'll make sure he does, Fire Pixie. Don't worry.
But I'm telling you, man, like the fact that we can point to examples of this is legitimately, these reports are in mainstream, news publications. Of course, they don't go into the detail necessary, if we're to really provide a credible, a comprehensive evidentiary report on the case, right? But it's still like, how often do you even get that approach from the mainstream publications in the first place, right? It's very rare, I would say. And
Yes.
so the fact of the matter is that we have another example of a compound with direct ties to radical imam, right? Responsible to some degree or another for helping facilitate the 93 World Trade Center false flag bombing with Omar Abdul Rahman. And so it makes a lot of sense that, especially mirroring the parallels between what I just covered on the Omar Mateen Pulse nightclub episode, between that radical Islamic seminary course.
Wait. So there is a tie, or there's something that connects that shooting at that nightclub to 9/11.
Oh yeah, because it's the same organization. So this was all CIA domestic operations, in my opinion, and they were covering the front. So they were covering the domestic and international front, right? I mean, they were really kind of providing this pretext and subconscious outlook of the American people in regard to right-wing domestic terrorism, in context of like the OKC bombing, Ruby Ridge, Waco, right? And then simultaneously, they're seeding the narrative of Islamic, international terrorism, right? Now, if we listen to Michael Riconosciuto in the Ted Gunderson report on the Oklahoma City bombing, Riconosciuto says it was a CIA operation to create these direct ties to, first of all, to manufacture these organizations and groups that would carry out these operations, and then also to seed in those narratives of domestic right-wing, right, militias. Right, we all need to be in fear of the Klansmen living under, the floorboards, basically, and tying someone like, let's say, Randy Weaver to Timothy McVeigh, and saying that they're one and the same, and then same goes for at Waco, right? So I mean, I am very much under the impression that Riconosciuto was 100% accurate when he stated the fact that it was, an institutionalized covert operation to seed these narratives in the public consciousness, as well as create the false flags themselves and manufacture them, and green light go whenever the time may come and all of the pieces are in place. That's how they operate. I think it's as clear as day. You know what I mean? And so again, we have this ridiculous direct connection that is, to me, further evidence of an institutionalized approach of manufacturing these, they're manufactured crises, right? They're essentially false flags, but I do think that more often than not, they, collateral damage to them means nothing, right? And I mean, it's like a few dead kids in the peasant class. This is a feudalist system, right? These are ruling oligarchs. They have no empathy or sympathy for us, right? And so I think that the compartmentalized aspect of, espionage in itself is almost designed for that exact reason and purpose, and I think the core root causes of all of these manufactured crises is the hidden hand of, the intelligence apparatus, right? And so, once again, man, like, I'm not shocked, and and this will be coming up in the future, because I think that there's a lot more there, and that this radicalization process, they are seeking out young adults, young children, that are already very vulnerable psychologically, right? So this is sort of like, they know, right, the character, like, basically they have these specific characteristics that they're looking for, and they have talent spotters all over the country and all over the world. And I think that the gifted program in public schools is one of those institutionalized forms of spotlighting and identifying the useful assets at
I
an
was in the
early
gifted
age.
program, bro. Yeah.
Hey, buddy, I'm just saying, like,
I think it was called Open Doors or some shit.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical of those, man.
It was all right.
It was all right.
Or nothing. Yeah, I was fine.
Hell yeah, buddy. Hell yeah. But I definitely, anybody who is at all like considering the mainstream version and official narrative behind Columbine, yeah, go listen to that Charlie Robinson episode, and then also read Dave McGowan's article called "Anatomy of a School Shooting," and he goes through it all, and it's amazing, right? And he's just the man, dude. But to introduce Hosanna, though.
Okay, I was about to pull the comment back up.
Hell yeah. Yeah, like I said before, I don't think it's a coincidence that the term translates from Hebrew to please save us. I don't. It's like, what is happening here? And I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch the first season of True Detective because it's been so long. I remember watching it when it first came out, and that first season stands alone as really one of the best seasons of television I've probably ever watched, right? And
Yeah.
again, maybe coming back to it from a different approach and a different angle, I'll feel differently, but I don't know. From everything I can remember, I thought it was a very philosophical, but also accurate portrayal of how these horrific cases of abuse and these also very much, higher networks implicated within these, cycles of abuse. It's interesting to me, and I think that everyone should watch that first season for sure. And but this right here, Ponchatoula, Louisiana, right? Um, this is terrifying, right? And I think that there's kind of this interesting thread of like the Cajun culture in that area as well, which I'll get into that because there's like this I don't know, I can't recall the name of the event, but it's allegedly where they wear masks, right? And they're very very like unique, strange masks, right? And I'm trying to remember what the whole point of the festival was, but this group was essentially kind of involved with that sort of culture in many ways. Yeah, yeah.
Are
And
you talking Mardi Gras?
well, not Mardi Gras. There's actually there's this like beyond Mardi Gras. There's this
It's like a secret festival.
it's at the very least a set of practices, right?
Right,
Within
right.
yeah,
Well, I
the
mean,
construct.
that's really where voodoo comes from.
It's
Like
exactly where
based
voodoo
in
comes
this
from.
country is from Louisiana, from New Orleans. And all the paranormal activity down there is very it's
Right.
high strangeness for sure, bro.
Oh yeah. Oh, hey man.
Cryptid
Okay, yeah.
activity.
I'm going to introduce this. I'm not going to I almost jumped on the next thread because I think it provides such a great dovetail here, but we should finish the introduction process first to Hosanna because all of this, I think, again, it's providing a parallel between Presidio, Finders, right? Franklin, like all of these various networks that we've really done the deep dives on the cases. Um, I mean, attached to these scandals. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But
Yeah.
so if you read this article at the Seattle Times, I think it's a great introduction to this whole scandal because Ponchatoula, Louisiana, allegedly, this is by Alan Sayre in the Seattle Times, as I said. And it starts out by talking about this individual named Donald Moore, who allegedly from his tire store next door, he got an up close look at the strange changes that went on at the once bustling Hosanna Church. The congregation had dwindled to a few reclusive members who chased away visitors. Now, keep in mind that the individual who is allegedly, not allegedly, I mean, he's in prison at this very moment. So, his name is Louis LaMonica Jr. and his father was Louis LaMonica as well, and he actually was allegedly like this, very respected pastor and preacher in his day, and so it was after his death in the 80s when apparently it went in the church kind of went into the hands of a few different pastors and leaders and then finally wound up essentially being given to the son Louis LaMonica Jr. But so that's kind of just a very very brief minor history of how it got into the ownership of Louis LaMonica Jr. But again, I will say that his father did seem to be quite respected in the community, right? So it's a drastic, change here once the death of his father occurs, and he retains possession of the church. So the congregation, as I said, had dwindled to only a few reclusive members. It was like from a couple thousand down to, I believe, 10 to 15 members in by 2003, I think, and if I remember. But so either way, the windows, they seem to be kind of like separating themselves from the community very much so, right? At this point, once it got into the possession of Louis LaMonica Jr. So allegedly the windows were painted white so no one could see in. And just before it closed for a couple of years, 8 dump trucks came in and spread dirt over the church's back lot. We never got any legitimate reports to claim exactly what was discovered in the back lot. But I will say that all these different, you had cattle going missing, you had family pets that were going missing. There was a lot of animal sacrifice being done. And
Yeah.
this is very interesting to me because it is perfectly in the vein of, you remember the ritual sacrifices in Untermeyer Park connected to David Berkowitz and right, 22 disciples from hell, right? And
Yeah.
also deeply involved in the finders, right? What did they find? They found jars of urine and feces, and they found mind control manuals, and they found legitimately an altar in the middle of this room where it looked as if they were 100% sacrificing animals, but for ritualistic purposes. And you can I'll explain the sacrifice of these 2 goats with the finders in a moment, because it's really amazing. It kind of provides another perspective into the belief system that they're practicing very often within these satanic occult doctrines, and yeah, the mind control aspect of it all, right? Like, this gets very strange in regard to Hosanna. And so anyway, the suspicious, basically, it was around this time in June of 2005 when basically the suspicions played out, and almost no one in the southeastern Louisiana town of 5,000 people could have imagined that 9 people, including the pastor, his wife, and a sheriff's deputy, right? So again, we have an example. Remember, Mark Dutroux, he explains how, I believe it was Ann Marshall and Effie Lambrix that he had kidnapped and abducted with the help of local police officials. Local police.
Yeah. Four cops,
Yeah,
I believe.
there you go. It's exactly what it's just completely insane to me. And so again, we have 9 people here, including this pastor, his wife, and a deputy sheriff, who are accused of engaging in cult-like sexual activity with children and animals inside the halls of worship. 8 faced child rape charges that could bring the death penalty at the time. You can't.
Well, it should have.
Yes, should have. Yeah, honestly. So Moore says that you can't believe something like that was going on right under our own feet. Authorities said witnesses have described the use of robes, pentagrams on the church floor, sex with a dog, and the sacrifice of cats. So again, bestiality came up in the X dossier with Dutroux victims. Regina Loof, man,
Oh, God.
I will never be more
Killer.
more disturbed, my friend, than reading through what she claims happens to her. And that level of detail, you have to be really sick psychologically to even just imagine, right? Just coming up with something like that out of whole cloth. There's no way in my mind, but of course there are psychopaths in the world. But that is one I'm very convinced of, and especially in regard to Regina Loof and the X dossier. But so, not only sex with the dog, but the sacrifice of cats, the drinking of blood. The alleged victim suspected to number up to 24, and included children ranging from infants to young teenagers, some of them offspring of the accused. which consistently happens. I mean, again, the Dutroux network, the X dossier, that was exactly it. They would utilize their own, I believe it was a grandmother, was essentially exploiting her granddaughter to run. It was very much sort of in line with Paul Bonacci and his role in Franklin, because they would
Yeah,
use them to
that's
run roughshod over the other victims that had, right, and also to help kidnap and abduct the other child victims,
yeah,
right? And
exactly.
then they would forcefully, make him partake in a child ritual sacrifice after forcefully making him partake in the sexual abuse aspect of it before the snuff film part of it, because he was explaining how they picked up, him and Lawrence King would go pick up a film director in a private plane. And then they would take that film director to Colorado, and all of a sudden they had a couple of victims that they had abducted. And then they would take those terrified children who, according to Paul Bonacci, he talked to them, and he gauged them, as much as he potentially could in that weird, strange moment and role that he was playing as an abducted victim who had been, you know, conditioned
Yeah.
to facilitate this abuse. My God, could you imagine what that would be like? And it's so much. It's very, very similar to that, right? As far as um, the role being played, because that's exactly what happened in the X dossier. Is she was utilized in exactly that way. She even would help abduct other children, other young girls, and then unfortunately they would find out who she befriended the closest out of the abductees, and then they would leverage that relationship against the granddaughter, the young child who had been severely abused through the network. And yeah, and they would then exploit her in that way. So where she would, and she's the one who explained the hunt, the process of the hunt, and everything that was taking place in the woods in Belgium. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's disturbing as hell, my friend. But it's seems to be, you know, like it's very much that the abusers, they do they do target their own family members and condition them to be a part of the abuse. And it's a very strange dynamic, but it's something that I do continue to witness as a resurface tactic as well. And so anyway, um according to the prosecutor in some rape cases and child molestation cases, they claimed that I've never had a group accused of doing anything like the Hosanna Church, right? Said the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff Daniel Edwards, who was a former state prosecutor. And so investigators think the abuse began in 1999 and continued until the church closed in 2003. But it was not until a woman called from Ohio in April saying she fled to protect her child that police claimed they had an inkling of what happened. So about this same time, the church's pastor, Louis LaMonica Jr., who I mentioned before, 45 years old, walked into the neighboring Livingston Parish Sheriff's office voluntarily, sat down, and according to investigators, named names and detailed activities that had occurred inside the church. LaMonica was then arrested, followed by 8 others authorities described as central members of the ring. All but one are being held without bond at this time in 2005. Even the tipster from Ohio, Nicole Bernard, she was arrested on rape charges along with her former husband. That gets even more strange. So, Edwards said the group apparently had an effective formula for escaping detection: the use of a church, a close-knit relationship among the members, and victims unlikely to report abuse. They were very secretive and very good about keeping a secret, Edwards said. LaMonica's attorney, Michael Teal, did not return calls, but had said previously that the charges would not hold up in court. Generally, I believe there's been a rush to judge based on conjecture, rumors, and leaks to the media, Teal told the Advocate of Baton Rouge. Edwards stopped short of saying the cult consisted of devil worshippers, but said some defendants told investigators Devil worship was the reason for their participation. Edwards added, the defendants and witnesses also gave statements saying a dog was sexually abused and at least 2 cats were sacrificed. Authorities seized 24 computers, which the FBI is checking. Sheets and carpeting were taken from the church for DNA tests. We'll get into that as well. Officers spent several days digging in the back of the church, but haven't said if anything significant was found. After Bernard was arrested, police in Ohio said they searched a storage unit and found mattresses, videos, and 9 garbage bags full of costumes. LaMonica and his wife, Robin, also faced allegations of having sex with children in their home. Now, this is when it gets even more interesting, because Nicole Bernard, she called the sheriff from Ohio. She's the tipster, right? She told him that she had fled the town of Ponchatoula to protect her daughter and that there was something evil happening at the Hosanna church. I gotta take a drink, dude.
Dude, you're fine. You're fine.
Got a dry mouth. But basically, she would not name any names. And when pressed for more information, Nicole would deflect the question. What do you say? Isn't that the same stuff they found in those tunnels? Yes. Yes, dude. Yeah, and that's disturbing as hell. And there's a very long form article that I pulled up when that actually happened that I need to bring back up and bring to the table soon, because there's definitely more deeper connections to those J tunnels, right?
And look, he brought this up. I think that's pretty cool. Baton
What was that?
Rouge. It means red wand.
Oh,
Like
wow.
baton.
Wow.
Yeah. Rod,
My
stick.
God.
Yeah, that's fuck yeah, Dr. Corbin.
All I think is Hollywood, right? And the origin of that term as well, or that name in itself. But yeah. No, I'm not. There are very much, symbolic, right? Symbolic meanings and gestures and really
in all of it, dude.
In all of it. In the construction of, almost every aspect of the United States, which is why I believe, as I said last week, that I believe what David Livingstone wrote, that it was the foundation of America was a Rosicrucian mission, man. And right? For these, right? For them to practice their heretical views. I mean, it truly does seem to be the case. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't strive for independence. I mean, holy shit. But to accept and embrace some false sense of independence, and right? And then embrace the false reality of this sacred destiny, as I said last week, like, this is a mistake, and it's constructed for us to, again, through, convenience, we embrace our own oppression, right? It's just, it's a really brilliant and ingenious method of control. And if it weren't completely based in psychopathic tendencies, right? Like, I mean, my God, but it is really the covert structure of power itself that I think is more important to understand than ever before, right? If we're ever going to contend with, right, and grapple with our true enemy,
they are psychopaths and they do want to kill us. that's
fucking
no
man.
joke. So.
Absolutely. So of course, like I said, this Nicole Bernard, who was the original individual who called the sheriff from Ohio, called the sheriff in Louisiana. She refused to name any names and was then pressed for more information, but deflected all the questions and essentially hung up the phone. She was given calls back, but of course something was always up, and so she couldn't either answer the phone or so. After her original statements, she essentially stopped volunteering any information whatsoever, and so the sheriff really didn't have to wait too long, because it was only a matter of the next day. Within 24 to 48 hours, you have Louis LaMonica Jr. The day after Nicole Bernard called the sheriff. Louis LaMonica Jr. walks into the police headquarters and allegedly said to the receptionist, "I want to talk about the dedication of a baby to Satan."
Get
It
the
was
fuck
held
outta here.
at the church upstairs in what is called the youth room.
Stop it, dude.
Uh-huh. And he says, over the next several hours, investigators
shit.
listened to Louis LaMonica Jr. go over the dark details of what he and his members of the congregation were guilty of. He described a room where all the windows were covered in black to keep out any natural light. There was a pentagram in the middle of the floor and a book of spells and temptations. There were 5 others present: Austin Bernard III, Louis LaMonica's wife, Robin, church member Paul Fentano, the sheriff's deputy, Chris LaBote, and Patricia Pearson. According to LaMonica, they would begin like any ordinary church service, but satanic music would be played, replacing any ordinary hymns. There were candles burning, and the dedication of the infant to Satan within the center of a pentagram. She was put in the middle in a black dress. They encircled and chanted around the child, who was Trey Bernard's daughter and was only 1 year old at the time, before killing a cat, draining it of its blood, and drinking it. According to Lewis, they did not make the child consume the blood because she was apparently too young at the time, and instead took off her dress and sprinkled the cat's blood all over the infant's body. Bernard later confessed to police that he had been raping his daughter since she was 2 months old.
Oh, fuck.
According to LaMonica, this type of dedication had been happening every couple of months for 5 years, and that 9 adults, including himself, were involved. On other occasions, he said certain girls would be picked up in order to have sexual relationships with the men and the women. The guys would line up.
Sorry. I was laughing at a comment.
No, I saw the comment. That's fucking terrible timing.
That one guy's name was Paul Fentanyl. Like,
it seemed that way. But yeah, it's
all right, continue.
No, you're good, buddy. It's probably better that you interrupted for just that moment, because I was getting emotional just reading it.
Yeah, that was all pretty dark, dude. But that stuff about his fucking daughter, yeah, is that guy still alive?
Oh yeah, and
he's like free.
so no, that at the very least, at the very least, a few of these individuals, they took the fall for, I think, a wider network that was in play at the time, especially considering the level of documented evidence. For example, the films, they were creating child pornography. So this was, to some degree, right, an enterprise. You know what I mean? And this was not just some sort of network of abuse where they were utilizing the pornography for their own, sadistic benefit, whatever that being. Yeah.
We're still going. We're still on both.
Hell yeah, buddy. Hell yeah. But so here's where it gets even more strange, because basically, I mean, the 9 adults, including himself, and then of course these certain girls would be picked up in order to have sexual relationships with the men and the women. And so it reminded me of Michael Aquino a lot because of Lilith and his connection with his wife, and their sort of approach to abuse was very much is very similar, very much like Marianne McLean as well, in regard to the Process Church of the Final Judgment, right? Yeah. So
I'm with you.
Basically, the guys, according to Louis LaMonica, would line up one by one. They would come and then they would have sex with the individual victims, and then the same would go for the women as well. They would have lesbian sex, basically acting like one was a man and one was a woman. So they were still playing the gender dynamic of sexual intercourse, right? But yeah, that was so. It was essentially just they were participating in orgies, and all the individuals, as far as the members, were involved in abusing the victims. So it wasn't as if there are a small group of guys within the group were responsible alone. So there was a lot of guilt to share. And so you, according to him, you would place one of these children victims in the middle of this pentagram, and then it was your turn to be with this one. Everybody got a turn. It was like nobody missed out, including the women, he says. There were also small boys, including LaMonica's 2 sons, who were 4 and 7 years old at the time. They were passed between their father, Bernard, and Paul Fentano. He also claimed that feces were everywhere and that urine had soaked into the carpets. He even said that during these satanic rituals, he would become distorted by the devil, and that demons would change him into an animal, a snake, a fox, a wolf, or a spider. When he was distorted by the devil, LaMonica claimed he would lust for animals, so he would subsequently have sex with the family's pet poodle in the pentagram drawn on the floor. He would also force his sons to have sex with the dog in front of the other worshippers. Exactly like Dutroux. I mean, it's insane, man.
Dude, what is it with the fucking dogs?
And the Black Baron Benoit de Bonvoisin, he did the same thing. They did the same thing. So they were forcing bestiality on these young children and engaging in it themselves, of course, as far as this is concerned. But yes, the fact that it was done almost as like a humiliation ritual in a way, because it's done in front of the other worshipers, I don't know if that's humiliating in regard to their belief system and practices, but it's strange to say the least, right? And especially seeing as it seems as if a lot of this was for purposes of child pornography as well, right? So we're talking snuff films, and that is just a repeat of North Fox Island, right? And so
we talked about that. We talked
Yep.
about that on one of my episodes, I think.
It's insane, brother. But before it's all said and done, man, this LaMonica wrote 260 handwritten pages of confession where he details explicit sexual acts committed against children in the name of Satan. Police were able to identify up to 25 different children from the area aged between 1 and 12 who were raped and used as sex objects. But they fear that the real number ranges in the hundreds. Nicole Bernard, the woman who made the initial call to the police, was also arrested. Police in Ohio searched a storage unit and found soiled mattresses, dozens of videotapes, and 9 garbage bags full of costumes. Police in Louisiana confiscated 24 computers from the homes of the Hosanna congregants. All these computers contained child pornography. Police also found dozens of videotapes, hundreds of computer disks, and 8 large boxes of documents and photographs in the church offices. LaMonica, his wife, and 7 others were arrested and charged with the rape of a child and for acts against humanity for the bestiality. And he's currently serving 4 life sentences to run concurrently. He has had a petition to appeal denied, but Bernard received 3 consecutive life sentences for the rape of these children, including of his infant daughter.
Yeah, they should have just received the death penalty for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially when you realize that there's a much wider network that's been implicated, right? As is very typical in regard to these child exploitation networks, right, of abuse. And yeah, it gets a lot more interesting because it seems as if it, all these different insane stories come up throughout the case where Louis LaMonica claims that he was forced to write a false confession, right? Which sounds convenient, for his defense, right? For him to say that. But when you get into the details of who he's claiming was involved in forcing him to confess, was that the reason he had walked in that day to the sheriff's office and voluntarily, you know, um, confessed, right, to all of these different things and name names, including, all the members of the group, at least all the members that he was willing to implicate, right? Is that he was told to do so and that they would work with him and that he would be free to go upon confessing. And so it's completely insane, man, because he alleges that the females it's kind of interesting because he says that the female membership, they sort of had more of a powerful role to play than even the males that were involved, apparently, according to LaMonica. But again, this is according from the individual who came out and confessed to doing half of all of these things. So it's not a very reliable source, but he did definitely say that it was a false confession and that he was forced to he called his wife, first of all, he called his wife Robin the lady because she was an organizer and made sure stuff goes right, he says. This was his claim. And so Trey Bernard, who was also, convicted for abusing his infant daughter and other children in the network, was considered to be the mastermind. And LaMonica himself was the chief operator, apparently. And so LaMonica stated that the secret ceremonies had started by 1999 and carried on into 2003 when he and his wife separated and he moved out of the church building. Now, Bernard's wife, Nicole, who is the original individual who called the police the day before Louis LaMonica walked into the sheriff's office, she also had left her husband, Bernard, and took their daughter with her to Ohio. And so it's strange to me that you have, which, I mean, of course, it's not strange that Nicole would want to protect her daughter if she was, being abused in the network. But it is strange that Nicole herself was implicated as a perpetrator directly involved in abusing these children, right? So it's not as if she's absolved of any guilt here. And also the main point being that there had clearly been some sort of, like the relationships had deteriorated within the marriages of these two individuals, the Bernards and the LaMonicas. And that is kind of interesting considering the relationships that the women can continue to have with the members of the group. And so 2 days after LaMonica walked into Major Carpenter's office, Nicole had, of course, telephoned the sheriff department, Daniel Edwards, the man initially tasked with investigating the crimes that had taken place in his jurisdiction with these similar allegations. And so later on, right, he basically claims that there was this irrevocably broken bond of trust, and that basically, there were key officials within the local government that had been directly involved in the scandal, and that the only individual who was kind of prominent within, let's say, an authoritative figure was the sheriff's deputy, Chris Labatt, who was really the only individual of prominence that was sort of mentioned, in all of this scandal, publicly at least, given most of the attention. And so, yeah, it basically, Bernard had confessed to abusing his child, according to Brown's testimony. But when he told Labatt, the deputy claimed he couldn't do anything without physical evidence. Now, when Bernard shared a notebook in which he wrote of the abuse, Brown took the writing he described as stomach churning to Labat, and what was left. This is interesting because this investigator takes this notebook of confessions and he takes it to Chris Labat, the sheriff's deputy, right? And he's left wondering why nothing came of it. And of course, at the time, it didn't occur to him yet that this sheriff's deputy was himself a member of the group.
It's a piece of shit. Yeah.
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 And so Bernard later even referred to them. He referred to these individuals as the perverted musketeers, one for all and all for one, essentially. And so yeah, you have all these individuals being rounded up and interrogated, and all these various allegations are coming forward. But
Corbo
yeah,
has a question, I think. Did LaMonica ever explain where he got the rituals from? Just made up or raised in a church one day? Open
hey buddy, I'm legitimately currently in the middle of doing the deep dive for my own purpose of doing a solo episode. So I will have that answer for you, my friend, hopefully. And but as of now, I haven't yet tracked down exactly what the doctrine he was functioning off of, where exactly it came from, other than the fact that he claims to have been essentially mind controlled in a sort of way, right? Yeah. And that comes from his defense attorney, of course, Michael Teal, who comes up with this bizarre account in which he casts his client as the victim, and so of this woman preacher named Lois Mowbray, then 54 years old. He alleged that this woman was a false prophet, and she had taken over and driven out all but a small number of worshipers from the Hosanna Church, and that this became her cult de facto. Isolated and obsessed by her notion of cleansing and generational curse, which rendered all guilty of the sins of their forefathers, and altar calls in which members of the congregation were called to publicly confess their sins so that she could cleanse them of their demons. And at the end of these ceremonies, the cleansed had to vomit out these demonic forces. So this is according to Michael Teal, the defense attorney. And so Mr. Teal claims that she was charismatic and had brainwashed his client and family into making a false confession. What a hell of a defense, right? Like, that's just insane to put that forward as the defense. But there was something cult, evil, and sinister going on at the church, Mr. Teal told the court in his opening statement. And that evil, sinister presence was personified by a self-proclaimed prophet, a person who professes to have a direct connection to God, a person who likened herself to the second coming of Moses. And so, it also seems that they have some sort of weird connection to Egyptian mythology, and how they believed that they referred to Louis LaMonica as a pharaoh. It was very strange because
pharaoh reincarnated. That's the whole that's the whole rebirth kind of. That's all the schools of Osiris.
My God, brother.
Stuff. Yeah.
It's just insane, right? The overlapping threads here. It's truly amazing, man. But she seems allegedly, someone who was destined to lead the Tangipoa parish out of Egypt and away from pharaohs, and supposed prophet used her claimed connection to God to manipulate, coerce, control, and exert authority and power. Now, she was arrested for failure to report child abuse. Although this is not a crime in Louisiana, if you are a pastor, she was not specifically not officially qualified as such. Charges against her were dropped. She had instructed LaMonica to write down his sins in order to cleanse himself through confession. It's So this, rather than going to the authorities, was her reaction to his violent tales of abusing his son sexually. So, allegedly. So there's no mention of Satan or any of the rituals, the animal mass or transformation in any of the more than 200 self-pitying pages, LaMonica wrote detailing what he did to his children and who he did it with. But it was his first original confessions that, really gave most of the details regarding all of the abuse, right? And so I think that once I was digging a little deeper into this woman, this Mowbray, who I can't quite tell how to pronounce her name either, but I'll figure it out at some point. But it seems like maybe this is the transitionary point to find an individual who potentially has, deeper connections to the wider network at play here, because it for her to have been sort of dismissed and no accountability whatsoever in context with her involvement, that alone is a little eyebrow raising for me. But we'll see. Again, I haven't gotten to the bottom of this entire story because I'm gonna have to really get through all of the different um, you know, it's gonna take me a little bit of time, but it's like 600 pages, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna have to read through the confessions and everything as far as that's concerned before I come to any legitimate conclusion where I'm speaking in certain terms, right? But
Yeah.
I will say, I think that, all all the components are here, right? And it's like, man, when you have everything necessary, you know what I mean, to kind of create this, you know, just it's again a story that is resurfacing with the same exact tactics of all of these various networks that we've talked about before. As for example, what I wanted to say earlier was I had talked about Ted Gunderson, right, recently, and what I was intending on doing was talking to Jose about the really just mentioning to him the investigative leads memo in the finders. And this is something that we could just talk about for a second before we close out the show. Because honestly, man, um, it's I could spend the next 4 hours talking about these ridiculous networks of abuse. You know what I mean? But
I know.
but I think that when Ted Gunderson described the finders as a CIA front established in the 1960s, I think he's 100% right. And I think that as shocking as that allegation may seem, like, man, when you witness what has happened under the guise of intelligence, right? What has taken place? I mean, it's we mentioned earlier just the ability to have so much access to the White House with child escorts, right? And to have young male prostitutes taking midnight tours of the White House. I mean, it's just the level of control. Just consider the amount of influence and power you must have if you can pull strings and make something like that happen. I mean, and guess who took the fall for Confessions of a DC Madam? Craig Spence, Henry Vinson, but really Craig Spence. They gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. I mean, he was an intelligence asset. Everyone should know that by now. And yeah, he Nick Bryant believes he killed himself, and I think it's possible that but what Nick Bryant believes is something that most likely happened to Epstein himself, right? Which is you've become overexposed. We're going to have to hang you out to dry. So here's the facts of the matter here. And with Epstein, of course, he became willing to name co-conspirators, and that really kind of, I would say, cemented his fate. You know what I mean? But yeah, but I will say, like, Craig Spence, man, like, he was given an offer you kill yourself or we'll have to kill you, right? But one way or another, you're gonna die, my friend, right? Whether you're an asset, a longtime asset for the intelligence community or not. And so I think Craig Spence probably did kill himself, but I think it was all because he had no choice. He had no other choice, right? And I don't know. I don't if you had that
I don't know what other choice you would have.
yeah, exactly. If you were given the ultimatum to take your own life or allow someone else to commit murder, you know, it's like I don't know which one is a better fate, but controlling your own fate, I would have to say I'm a little more, in line with that idea. But
Yeah.
so it kind of makes sense that Craig Spence would do something like that. But anyway, so members, according to Ted Gunderson of the Finders of the CIA front, were specially trained government kidnappers with top clearance and protection in their assigned task of stealing children, torturing and sexually abusing them, sometimes involving them in satanic orgies, bloody rituals, and murder of other children with the slaughter of animals. The Finders are known sexual degenerates who use a fleet of unmarked cars to grab targeted children from parks and schoolyards. Many times, using their own child members as decoys, they lure the innocent children away from the crowd close to their vans. The adults inside grab the children, drug them, and transport them to a series of safe houses where they await their ill-fated end. They are then used in ceremonies. The children are either murdered and sacrificed for body parts, or they are sold as sex slaves, auctioned off at various locations in the Northern Hemisphere. In the past, they have been auctioned off near Las Vegas, Nevada, and Toronto, Canada, Lincoln, Nebraska, Michigan, and Houston. Marion David Petty, the leader of the cult, is an identified pedophile, homosexual, and CIA officer. His son was a former employee of a CIA proprietary firm, Air America, which was notorious for smuggling drugs destined for the United States out of the Golden Triangle into Saigon during the Vietnam War. So that, I believe that is exactly what is happening in current state of reality. This is an institutionalized form of sadistic child abuse.
Yeah.
They're practicing heretical satanic doctrines, but I don't know what's more important to them. I mean, I honestly don't.
It's hard to believe or to even accept that it's happening, but it's definitely happening, dude.
We should probably end the show, huh?
Yeah, I was gonna say, ending it on a dark note, but
very dark. I'm sorry.
I
Yeah.
don't know, and I do think it's important that people know about this stuff and know that it does exist. And if you want to look into it, there's podcasts like the Underclass podcast or shows like Already Dead. So you got a place to go.
And you know what comes to mind is, before we do our plugs, is the fact that, man, I mean, you had former state senator from Nebraska, John DeCamp himself, right, who wrote the Franklin cover-up. And he claimed that the Finders were associated with the CIA and that they were abusing children by means of indoctrination. He even said, "I was getting information anonymously. I found out later that it came from CIA people who were concerned about what had happened. The CIA had denied any involvement in it, even today. But there's enough documentation to show that children at a fairly tender age were being used for sexual purposes, to compromise people, and for the mind control nonsense. Why? I don't know. And I don't claim to know." Before John DeCamp died, he also made the stunning claim that the Finders operation was somehow directly connected to the Franklin network that had been exposed and covered up in Nebraska around the exact same time. So, and if we need any more recent examples, I mean, you have I mean, this just a perfect way to confirm our more darkest suspicions is this guy named Theodore Gerald Rice, who was a professor at Georgetown, which was deeply embedded in the finders, and also happened to be a member, of course, of the cult itself. And May 10th, 2017, a U.S. district judge sentenced this man, Theodore Gerald Rice, Georgetown alumni, member of the Finders cult, at 81 years old, to 90 months in prison, followed by a lifetime of supervised release for the distribution of child pornography. According to his plea agreement, Rice used a personal computer to this was in 2015, to distribute in a peer-to-peer network a file containing a video of minors engaged in sexually explicit conduct. Additionally, during a search of Rice's home on September 9th, 2015, investigators found Rice in possession of various electronic devices and CDs that were later found to contain 291 videos and 29 still images of child pornography. So, in closing, I want to legitimately repeat what I said when we brought on Nick Bryant, because his book just ripped the veil of naivete from my face, never to return. And I'm so grateful for that. But it's been a dark road, my friend, and
I'm sure.
I will say that the author, of course, of the Franklin scandal, a story of power brokers, child abuse, and betrayal, he wrote in his book that he wasn't so anguished by the threats and intimidation he endured delving into the arcane mysteries of that universe, but rather by the realization of its very existence. A universe that encompasses the refined industrial destruction of children and its cover-up by the very state and federal authorities who have pledged to protect children from the depravity of evil men. The children and our society as a whole have been betrayed. And I think nothing can be more accurate than that. And yeah, despite the bowl of black pills, I apologize. I should have, I guess we should remind ourselves that, it is sort of the spirit of Thanksgiving, right? And it's right around the corner. So maybe we should end by just reminding ourselves, at least from my perspective, I'm very grateful for the place that I am in, intellectually, philosophically. I hope to only continue to grow, but it's I've never been more grateful, man. And it's because of finding like-minded individuals like you, Jules, and like Jose and people in this chat, man. And yeah, I don't have to.
Dude.
Yeah, I don't have to live with that darkness alone,
Yeah.
And
you guys are awesome. Everyone watching.
Fucking A, man.
who
I got love for you, Jules. You know that, brother.
Yeah, man.
But happy Thanksgiving, my friend. Honestly,
Dude,
whether it's an ancient pagan holiday or not, I don't fucking care.
Don't sacrifice your turkey.
Exactly. Just be grateful for things that are worthwhile. We got to stop spending the majority of our time focusing on things we can't control and we cannot change. I think the reason I bring stories like this to the table is only for purposes of exposure. I really hope to just further expose people to the reality, the dark reality of what your government is capable of, what these individuals, have achieved in the name of progress. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Progress.
Yeah. So you want to go ahead and plug, buddy, and then I'll put my plugs in there.
Yeah, dude. Guys, Great People Podcast. I am on Patreon, patreon.com/Great People Podcast. Got two tiers. Got a lot of cool shit coming. Austin's going to come on for an episode.
Hell yeah, buddy.
I got Paranoid American coming on. Got a bunch of folks going to come on and do an episode. on Patreon. So I'm also on Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I'm on Twitter, Gray Pill Pod, and on Instagram, sometimes graypilled_podcast. I'll be streaming again Saturday. Saturday will be my next stream.
Oh yeah,
So,
buddy.
yeah, guys.
Go check out Gray Pilled, man. He's doing God's work for sure.
Hopefully, I'll have a tinfoil hat episode soon.
Man, that would be awesome. Yeah, honestly, I think, yeah, man, it was so great to just have a conversation with Sam privately there between all of us. I thought that was just such a cool opportunity, but he's the best, man. And anybody,
man,
anyone who doesn't know what Sam has to offer is so valuable. You don't quite understand. You know what I mean? Like you need to reflect and, just readdress the fact that he has provided such just an extraordinary opportunity to people like myself and the bump from tinfoil, the bump from tinfoil and just the swarm, it's kind of hilarious because I was always loyal to the foil and a part of the swarm for a long time. And so it was surreal just to go on tinfoil that first time and kind of get to say something back from all the times that I've been sitting there listening to Tinfoil Hat going,
yeah,
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, yelling at your phone.
100%, man. But yeah, I'm nothing but grateful to him. So, in the end, man, life is beautiful, right? There's a lot of darkness in this world, man. But yeah, life is absolutely beautiful, and we need to pursue things that are worthwhile and surround ourselves with people that have pure intentions and mean well, right?
Man.
Yeah,
for sure.
But beyond that, guys, I mean, follow me on Twitter, at Theater Thug AWP and at the Underclass Pod as well, or it's at Underclass Pod on Twitter, I think. And then follow me on Instagram at the Underclass Podcast. Man, if anything I've ever done, any of the episodes you appreciate and resonate with you, the best places to support me would be Buzzsprout or Patreon, both at the Underclass Podcast. And I'll probably be doing, no doubt, I've been putting off the darkness for a few weeks now, and I'm already in the midst of taking this plunge down the rabbit hole into the Hosanna scandal. So yeah, that's going to be really, I would say, the topic of the upcoming solo episode for the Underclass, and it'll be in the vein of satanic ritual abuse, attempting to provide more credible evidence to the fact that it exists. It's a reality, everyone, and the satanic panic was just a means to discredit the reality that we are facing, whether you like it or not. It really doesn't matter. So nothing but love to everyone here.
And hey guys, go subscribe to the No Way Jose Rumble.
Yeah,
and
I guess we should
if you
plug that.
haven't, go follow Jose on Twitter, Tower Gang Jose. He's on Instagram as well. I don't know his Patreon subscribers. Shouts out to all you guys. Here, let me.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, pull up some chats if you have any.
I don't know if we have any super chats, but Nado.
Nice.
Yeah, you want to use or shave this winter, use Nado. Go to Nado, and I don't know the promo code. I don't know if Jose has one. I'm sure he does. I should know it being the producer, but I don't. So shout out Nado and go support him if you want a good shave. So
I should be on. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go on the morning dump with Jose tomorrow. So
morning dump tomorrow morning as well. I was going to say that, and then Tower Gang Wednesday tomorrow.
Yeah. True.
Tomorrow night,
Hell
guys.
yeah, man. All right. Well, we've done 2 hours, so we better shut up and get out of here, dude.
All right, everybody. Yeah, I don't think we have any Rumble rants or anything, but we always appreciate when you guys donate. So thank you guys for hanging out. Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, guys.
We'll see y'all later.